Welcome to Grassroots Safety Conversations with Ross. Yes, I'm your host, and naturally my name is Ross. As your host, look, I've worked in industry for over 40 years and consider myself a bit of a safety professional who has worked at the grassroots, corporate and in the OH&S regulator environment. In saying this, my views and discussions that will be had in these podcasts are from my own experience as a safety professional and do not reflect any official policy or position of the organisation I have worked in or are currently working in. Yes, that's the legal bit out of the way. I'm trying to, with these podcasts, to demystify how safety has become so complex and trying to give some solutions that I've used and still using in my day-to-day role as a safety advisor. Look, the conversations will cover safety-related topics from systems to education and a series about the C word. Be careful here about culture, consultation, communication and the crap factor. We'll also have some special guests discussing their own safety challenges, so I'm looking forward to doing those little podcasts. Look, at the end of the day, as a safety colleague of mine always says to his workers at the early morning toolbox briefs, I just want you to leave the site each day to go home to your family or friends in one piece. So let's get on to today's topic of discussion. This is episode 3 of Grassroots Safety Conversations with Ross, and funnily enough it's around source of truth. This was given me some feedback from one of my listeners, all 30 of them, so I'm building on that. And one thing about a source of truth is to remember there's always a smoking gun when working with humans, as we all have an opinion on how to manage safety in our workplace. So, source of truth. Let's get started. What does this mean? Well, funnily enough, I had to look up Deming to find this, and Mr. Deming, being a profound knowledge person that he is, that a source of truth is a definitive source of information. Definitive source of information. I find that an interesting comment to talk about. So, from a safety perspective, we need to have some sort of appreciation of what it can do. What it can do is that, what is our source of truth? What can it do for us to provide a safe workplace? Look, we'll have to have a system around the Act, the regs and the compliance codes and understand the variations between them. We all know the Act is mandatory, so is the regulations is mandatory, codes and compliance is guidance. So that could be what you call a source of truth to help you meet your guidance to legislation. But what do we know? What we know, our internal thinking versus what we really understand. That's interesting, because what I think could be safe and practical in a system would be totally different from someone else. So we have to think about the human reactions on this and the psychological impacts. So it's very interesting when we think about systems of what we need to do and how we need to get there. So let's break it down a little bit further. Now in Australia, we're all individual, typical of us. We have the Safe Work Australia Act, all right? Covers most of the states in that area. But us in Victoria, we have our own OHS Act. But we have 6 acts to deal with from a safety perspective. We have 7 regulations we've got to think about and manage. So there's 13 all up for legal compliance. My God, that's a lot to think about and try and remember. But it is our source of truth. That's our source that we must adhere to. So we have 18 compliance codes. A lot of them have been rewritten recently by the regulator, and finally they're giving us some drive or direction of what we need to do to give us guidance and meet these obligations. No different from Safe Work Australia. They do exactly the same. All right. And so let's go to the next level. We have international standards, ISO. There's hundreds and hundreds of standards that give us guidance, from electrical fittings to ladders to working at heights. There's a lot of information out there. But we're looking for a systematic approach to manage our source of truth. Well, let's have a think about the International Standard 45001 OH&S management system. That gives us a bit of a guidance in that area, doesn't it, when you think about it? And also, let's not forget 45003. That's a psychological standard that's come in recently. All valuable sources of truth, but truth is in the application, isn't it, when we think about it? And then there's another one that I've come across many, many years ago, is the Book of Knowledge by the Australian Institute of Health and Safety. They have 39 different topics in that. I'm not going to go through each one of those, but they covers from incidents, hazards, risk management, incident management, how to consult, all sorts of variances. And they're all written by academia. All right, and I have a bit of a clash with academia. I think you need a source of truth. It's good academia can write things a certain way, but we have to, as safety practitioners, have to put them into practice dealing with people in the day-to-day world. Very, very difficult. So what's another level source of truth? Well, I've used over the years, I've always looked at overseas websites, and one is the Health and Safety Executive, HSE of Great Britain. Very, very good resource to get some additional information. Just remember, this is where legislation come from under Robbins, so just a reminder of that one. And we have CSC of Canada, that's the Canadian Safety Committee in Canada. Very good, another good, very good website to look in. And the other one I use for chemicals is the American Chemical Society, ACS. Have some very, very good graphics. And some of them, you watch them, you go, oh, how did that happen? Very visual. Is it a source of truth? Yes, it is for those ones, because a lot of those videos or the animations they've done actually post an incident. Now, we all know about the BP incident in the Mexican Gulf. I'm not going to name it. And we all done the old iron rigs in North Sea to death. I'm not going to mention that one, but we do know there's a lot of information out there. Gives us guidance. One thing that is not a good source of truth is Mr. Google when searching the web. Mr. Google, I hear a lot of people, they look up their health and what's wrong with this cut. I get on Mr. Google and tell him you need to do this, this and this. Not a good idea with Mr. Google. The research arm of Mr. Google, the academia side of it, not bad. It gives you ideas of where you need to look at around papers. So that's a bit of background on legislations and websites. Now, I've had a lot of people talk to me about books, Ross. What sort of books do you got? Not saying I have a lot of books from a lot of different writers, but I'm going to pick out my top 5 or 6. I think it's 7 on my little list here, so I'm going to try and make this as easy as I can. Now, one of the best ones I've come across recently is done by an author, Mr. Clive Lloyd. I follow him on LinkedIn, and his book is The Next Generation Safety Leadership. Fantastic book, reads easy, and a lot of things are put in a very simple way to do it. And I think that's a good source of truth because he's a psychologist and done a lot of work in the industry. Very, very, very good book. The next one, when we think about systems, is the book by Greg Smith, and it's called Paper Safe. Now, this book is, Greg Smith is actually a lawyer, and he spent a lot of time on rigs, investigation, incidents and that, and he writes things in a very simple manner. Another really good resource book I would recommend to have a read of. And then we get into DECA, and this is a DECA done with Conklin, is Do Safety Differently. Now, DECA has done lots of books. I've got most of his books here. He comes from a totally different perspective, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it gives you some ideas from a different perspective, because being a pilot in aviation, checklist, he's very, very smart in that, and very, it's a bit heavy going reading, but good stuff to read. Another book is done by the authors Reed and Ritchie I've come across, about safety performance reimagined. And they put another spiel on safety performance. How can we do things? Is it a good source of truth? Well, these guys have been in the industry a long time. Very, very good book to look at. The next one I've got is The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety by Clark. Psychological safety has become a really big thing at the moment, and from a source of truth, you need to go to the experts, and I think he's one of the most forthright thinking authors. One thing when I used to teach at the local TAFE here in Geelong, funny, a little story on this one is that the lecturer's giving a lecture about a subject, and I'm going, where do they get this information from? So funnily enough, when he went for a break, I had a bit of a look and found out what the book he was using. Now the book, and I recommend this to a lot of students over the years, is the WHS A Management Guide. It is a great book. The one I've got is done by Archer, Borthwick and Tempe, but it's been updated recently. It's a great book. I think the new authors are Archer, Borthwick, Travers and Rushina. Brilliant. And this book covers everything from introduction, legal framework, consulting, developing a systematic approach, all the way risk hazards around risk management, ergonomics, hygiene, psychosocial hazards, safe design, which we don't do much about, auditing, and emergencies, and a bit of workers' compensation. Now, and this is an Australian book written by Australian authors, and I think that's really valuable when we want to look at a source of truth, something that's got some information in there that works really well. And they do talk about some case studies in there that've gone through the courts. Another couple of ones is the Australian Master Work Health and Safety Guide, done by various authors. I think it's a CCH document. The other one is the Health and Safety Handbook by Tanda Press, and done by the Health and Safety Lawyers. And we discussed about how we manage our notes, and I said Excel spreadsheet. Every time I have one, I write it in and type it up, date, time. It's a source of truth when you need it. Because funnily enough, I was having a conversation with a learned colleague the other day. Just remember, when you're giving an answer about some documentation or something about some guidance, just say, yes, Your Honour. And I like that when you add, yes, Your Honour. If you're going to go to a court of law, you've got to make sure your source of truth is as accurate as you possibly can, so far as reasonable practical. I'm just going to throw that one in there. So, one other thing I just want to finish on for this is that what are the principles of good administrative decision making? i.e. your source of truth. Good administrative decision making. So, what can we do? So we must follow the requirements in the legislation and all the regulations. We must do that. We also understand the limits of our discretion, or your discretion, your knowledge. I mean, some people, they say, I've been in safety 30, 40 years, or I should say that, and I know everything. You don't know everything. We're constantly learning all the time. Only exercise your statutory power for the purpose for which it is conferred. Don't overstep your boundary of your knowledge and skills. And in saying that, make sure you consider all matters relevant to the decision that is to be made, and ignore irrelevant matters. Ignore the background noise. Look at your source of truth. Consider relevant government policies. Have a look at some other government policies. They might help and give you guidance. Always act reasonably and in good faith. Good faith is something very, very important to be mindful of. Base your decision on the best available evidence you've got at that point of time. Don't preempt, don't forward think, just do what you've got. It's what's in front of you at the moment. And you try and give independent, genuine and realistic consideration to the decisions you are making. In the back of your mind, your source of truth. From a legal point, remember the accord around procedural fairness or natural justice. What would a natural person think, do or act on? We are all different. different backgrounds, different knowledge, different learnings, ethnic backgrounds, language barriers, the list goes on. So when you think about that procedural fairness or natural justice, think of your core source of truth that they understand. And the last but not the least, record and communicate your decision in the appropriate manner. Very, very important, because if you have to go to a court of law, as I said a bit earlier, yes, Your Honour, that's the best decision I made at the point of time and how I communicated. Look, I know it's probably been a little bit heavy, but all we can do is, the bottom line is, so far as reasonable, practical. So your source of truth, do your best you can with your knowledge and skill base, and all the best. So thank you for listening, and that's the final one for this episode. Thank you for listening to this podcast. I hope it has been of benefit. So as to get you to think about your family and friends and how working safely will get you home to them at night. Very important, isn't it? And if you've got grandchildren too, let's throw them into the mix. Look, I'm on Instagram, Grassroots Safety with Ross, one word. And there is where I will notify you when the next podcast is available. You can email me at grassrootsafety@outlook.com. Yes, Grassroots Safety is all one word. If you have a topic or a query on what I discuss on this podcast, or reply to me on Grassroots Safety with Ross on Instagram. And funnily enough, this podcast is sponsored by Safety Zone, a consultancy firm based in Victoria, Australia. Look, I do not receive any financial support from them, just moral support, and boy, do I need a lot of that at the moment in doing these podcasts. And when my daughter gets organised, she's going to help me out do my Instagram posts or get better at it. So until next time, people, live long and prosper, as Spock would say.